Hi, I'm Sarah Stockham, host of Simply Sarah, and I'm so pleased that you are here. Every conversation is carefully crafted to bring you gifts, to give you tools for people who are leaders. And you may say, well, I'm not a leader with a capital L. I heard somebody recently say this, and my response is you don't need to have the capital L in front of the word in order for you to be a leader. If you are somebody who is mentoring others, who's encouraging others, who is guiding a way, then you are a leader. And this is also for entrepreneurs, people who are finding that working for themselves, working with other people in collaboration, creating, working together to share concepts and ideas in amazing ways is their best way to show up in their world. It's their vibration. It's who they are. I'm super excited to bring in Lauri Smith today. She is the person who created Voice Matters. She has an amazing background. Lauri, it is such a delight to have this time with you, to share this space with you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's a delight for me too.
I would love to know if there were other people in your growing up world who gave you permission, who were already showing you that stage and acting and using your voice, because voice matters. If there were people who were lighting the way for you, or were you somebody who figured out that this is who you are and this is the path that you worked best on?
I think the answer is both.
Great answer.
Yeah, I will say, I remembered a while ago when I was writing some post for social media that my mother discovered me in the backyard talking to myself.
I love it. And, what a great thing.
Yeah, or I think I was actually in the garage. I had been playing with some friends. We were making up stories and playing make-believe. And kids being kids, they were like, okay, I'm going to go to the pool now.
Right.
And I said, you all have fun. I'm going to finish the story.
Yes.
And then I'll join you. My hair was pinned up like Cindy Brady and little pin curls.
Yes.
And my mom opened the garage door and all this light came flooding in. And what could have happened was, what are you doing? Stop that. Yes. Instead, I got, I think I'm going to find an acting class for her.
So good.
I sadly was not very good until I was many, many, many years older. In like 19, 20, somewhere around there, I started to figure it out and get better. And then in between, I would drift away and spent some time being who I thought my family needed me to be, which was the good girl, all pulled together, got it all figured out, and eventually came up against that in theater, where it was like, okay, in order to really unleash your talent, any part of you that needs to be seen like you've got it all pulled together, you got to let that go.
Yes.
Surrender control, respond in the moment without like the brakes on.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that is so incredible that she opened up the garage door and there you were with your hair all curled and you were going to finish the story because the story needed to be told. And even as you were creating it together and they left to go to the pool, it still needed to have the completion. And I love that that is who you are. It's the work that you do, and that your mom saw this and that she was encouraging and supporting that as well. What was your road to from that space of taking acting classes and learning to find your voice and coming back to these spaces of this is how I need to act for my family, this is my supporting role in the family, to you coming to a place of saying, I am an entrepreneur and I'm going to help other people find their voice because voice absolutely matters?
Yeah. Well, from that moment at, I think it was about 7 years old to, I'm going to fast forward to 27. At 27 years old, I had been the first one in my family to go to college. I was working in the Silicon Valley as an executive assistant during the day and doing theater at night and on the weekends, working way too much, and even in their teams, you put those together. And I did have this voice inside that kept pulling me toward living a more aligned life. Because at that time, during the day in the corporate setting, I had the emotional armor in front of my heart and an energetic mask with jaw tension and walked around saying, I'm fine. No one actually really fully believed me, which people in my acting class pointed out that I don't have a very good poker face, which is what makes me a great actor. But when I would say I'm fine, anybody who was sensitive knew it.
Right.
And I kept ignoring this voice that was saying, you know, you're meant to be somewhere else most of the time. And then every time a play would end, I would have like a post-show depression when all I had in my life was this masked up version of me.
Yeah.
And I remember someone asking me to fax something, which was my job.
Right.
And on the inside, I had this voice that said, don't you know I'm meant for greater things? And I realized, yeah. And that person asking you to fax something is not stopping you from doing those greater things.
Right.
You are. And around that time, I was starting to get curious about listening to this voice. And I thought that if I said yes to this curiosity, I was going to go act during the day or teach during the day and act at night and be a starving artist who also taught. Mm-hmm. And there was an exercise in my acting class that really is pivotal. It was pivotal in me going, and it's at the heart of the work that I do with others now. Most of the time in this acting class, 2 to 4 of you would be up on stage working. And the other 8 would be out there watching, plus Richard, the instructor. And on this day, it was something called a short stack where I was spotlighted. And anybody else who jumped up there with me, they weren't even coming all the way on stage with me. They were kind of getting up and throwing in scenarios.
Yes.
And yeah, I kept kind of pulling myself together in between each of the little vignettes. And Richard paused the exercise and said, whatever that is that you're doing, stop doing it. And I said, I'm not that comfortable having everyone's eyes on me. And he took off his glasses, which he did so many times over the years when there was a little extra something that he needed me to get. And he said, well, then you've picked a strange set of careers for yourself. You're an actor, a speaker, a teacher, a leader. Part of you wants this. Part of you knows you're meant to be here. And it was like my soul heard him. And the 5 to 7-year-old me that had actually known that back then also heard it. And I deeply trusted him and the safe space that he held with this. It was the Sideways Acting Studio. So I leapt back in and I was actively releasing the jaw tension and like releasing my chest muscles, that armor in front of the heart. And it was like layers of protections that I had spent a lifetime building up were melting away. I felt like fire and ice at the same time. And by the time the exercise was over, I looked out at my classmates and I could see and feel what kind of day every single one of them were having. And it was my first moment of oneness that lasted beyond the scene, beyond the play. I'd had them, but I always had to be like, let me put the character mask up, and behind that, I can try to let my own down. which was why I loved theater for all those years. It gave me the place to kind of pour me into it while still hiding.
Yes.
Oddly. And my acting took a huge leap after that. And it had a way of rippling out into my life. And shortly after that, I did decide to go get a degree in theater, thinking I'm going to teach. I did talk to a mentor about the starving artist thing, who kind of said, I'm not a starving artist. You're deciding you need to be one. That's not how it needs to go, which helped push me into doing it.
Yes.
And lo and behold, I haven't taught acting since 2017. I'm open to do it again. And it's kind of, the universe had different plans in store for me. I use my theater background as an actor, a director, and a writer. And I got called along the way to bring gifts from the world of theater to leaders with capital L's, small L's, change makers, visionaries, rebels, whatever they want to call themselves. I got called to help the quiet, the sensitive, the intuitive, kind of the outsiders get their voices into the conversation. And part of what I know is that to have our fullest impact, to be heard, we have to allow ourselves to be seen. It's a choice that begins with us choosing to be seen and heard and felt, just like I did in that moment in that acting class. So now here I am holding a very similar space called the Speaker's Studio. That is a lot like that moment back then. And it's taken 16 years of different curves and things, 16 or more. I don't remember how long graduate school was, from that moment to now, with lots of, the universe speaking through other people along the way.
This is profound, and I'm excited for the next part of our conversation. But before we get there, we're going to take a quick break. But when we come back, Lauri, I would love for you to talk about what it is that you have created, what it is that you are currently working on, that has come from this beautiful past of listening to the different voices of people outside that you respected and hearing them, and then allowing that to touch your heart, and how that's opened up incredible doors for you. We will be right back. We at Simply Sarah love Hudson Naturals. We also love Glass Arts Collective. If you're looking for a special gift for somebody, I invite you to go to their gallery and pick something out. We have been so pleased with the items that we've received from them. And you might think shipping glass could be a little bit iffy. The way that it was packed, the way it was presented was just fantastic. Glass Arts Collective. In this space of having this conversation with Lauri, she has this incredible way of helping people who are sensitive, people who are rebels. She has different words that she likes to use in this to help them find their own voice. And I would love for you to share what it is that you are currently working on, what you are gifting the world, how you are helping other people find their voice.
My favorite way of working with people these days is in the Speaker's Studio. And it is modeled after the Actors Studio and the Sideways Acting Studio that I was a part of, in part because I looked around the world and realized that a space like that for speakers, and using the word speaker is going to make some people say that's not me. for the sensitive visionaries, ambitious empaths, and loving rebels that are the voices we need to hear from in order to change the world for the better at perhaps a faster, smoother, easier pace and flow. There wasn't a space like that. And I decided, oh, I'm going to go ahead and create it. And I'm going to model it after the acting studio, the actors studio, where it's small groups. And there are so many reasons for that. And one of them is the world is not always a safe space.
We've learned this the hard way, haven't we?
Yes. It's not always safe to speak what's in our heart.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that have ways that they see and feel are important to change the world are speaking from the heart.
Yes.
And if the world told us we were wrong, we were too much, that our voice didn't matter, that children should be seen and not heard, that we were too much because we're too sensitive, too emotional, you name it, we end up suppressing by suppressing around our breathing and holding our voice in. And in order to really undo that and to learn to speak soulfully, where it's our soul speaking through our heart, up and out our mouth, yes, and vibrating in a soulful way, we need a safe space that's not just a one-on-one space in order to know that we can do that. And for years, I struggled and, why do some people have rooms with 100 people in them and I'm having trouble getting 6 people? And then I finally embraced, because if I actually listen to my intuition telling me what works, it's rooms with, say, 5 to 12 people for the deeper work.
Yes.
So I settled on 9. Each circle in the speaker studio has 9 people in it, doing deep work, going in and excavating what's happening in their mind that's getting in their way, what kind of old physical patterns are showing up. And most of the time it's beyond people's wildest dreams. Mm-hmm. One of the metaphors that I've been using recently is our instrument for singing is the same as our instrument for speaking.
It is.
It's more obvious when it's being played in a soulful way when it's a singer. So if you imagine Madonna singing songs in the 1980s, she was a rebel.
Right.
And then if you imagine Lady Gaga, who is also a rebel, there's a vibration that comes from Lady Gaga that is the speaking version of what I'm talking about.
Right.
They both had energy to energize a crowd.
Yes.
That's going on as well when I say soulful. So I'm working in that way to help people hear the voice of their own intuition and to share the message that they're here to share with the world through working in the speaker studio and everywhere from TikToks to TED Talks. Speaking is everything in that range these days.
It truly is amazing to me how technology has changed the stage. It used to be that you walked up steps and you got behind the curtain, and there would be somebody who would speak out front to introduce the whole whatever it was going to be, and the curtain would open, the lights would turn on, and there you were physically in front of and sharing and being and doing. And now we can be in our backyard with the camera and we can be creating and sharing what's coming from our heart, not reciting what Oscar and Hammerstein did, right? I mean, we have this whole other place, this whole other way of being able to communicate. And to be able to share. And I'm so loving that you talk about the word sensitive. I remember the point that I moved from calling myself an empath or thinking about myself as an empath to the word sensitive, because if I'm an empath, Lauri, I feel like I'm sitting at the end of a fire hose, needing to take in all of the information around me. And it's overwhelming. It's exhausting. Just a trip to the grocery store, I'm done, right? If I think about myself being sensitive, I can be sensitive to all of that energy. I can choose who I'm going to interact with. There becomes this whole other place of permission, a whole other place of decision and desire. Do I want to interact with those things or not? Now, I will tell you that sometimes still in family dynamics for me in the larger family, I find myself still playing the part in the family dynamics. We just had a huge reunion over a few weeks ago, and I just have come to that point of having this inner conversation with myself as a sensitive, of even in that place, you don't have to be that person anymore, right? That there's all of these places and choices of how we get to show up, how we get to decide how we're going to interact with the information that is presented around us. So thank you so much for using the word sensitive.
Yeah.
How did you get to the word rebel?
It was the short answer is I was starting a networking group and I thought, oh, I need to put a post out about that. I should tell people it's happening. And the sensitive, visionary, ambitious empath, and loving rebel popped into my head.
Okay.
And one of the reasons it popped into my head, I had a conversation with someone a couple of years before that about the word empath. And a coach of mine had said a masterful empath is kind of the sensitive that you're talking about, where you are an empath and yet you're kind of like a sorcerer. You're choosing what to take in and what not to.
Right.
And I was speaking to a woman and said, I joined all these empath groups because I realized my clients were empaths.
Right.
And it doesn't feel like they're also change makers or people on a mission in the groups I've found. And she said, well, it sounds like you're working with ambitious empaths. So she planted the seed of putting two words together that don't seem to go together.
Love it.
And when I was channeling, I love things that come in threes.
Yes.
So sensitive, visionary, ambitious empath. And then I just went rebels, and yet they're loving rebels because of that sensitivity feeling, if they're going to work with me. All different ways of saying leader or change maker. You're here and there's something in your world or the world that you want to be different. And part of why you're here is to help change that. And there are a lot of really rebellious, loving people in my world. Yeah, especially after I started owning it. Like there are some, even in class, when I'm running the speaker studio class, there are some that are like, oh, well, I'm having some resistance right now. And they're just putting it out there because it's a space where they can, and because I asked for more rebels. So they're going to say it if they're having resistance to something that we're doing that day, because that's part of their role in the world. It reminds me of that movie Network, I think, where he's on television and he says, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. It's that kind of energy, that rebelliousness. That's part of what helps create change.
Lauri, thank you so much for speaking so directly to that, because I think that there are people who have these ideas that I'm going to almost say they're almost fantasy, that they are these things that will kind of come through and they'll think, oh, that might be that would be a good thing, right? In the realm of good things that could happen. And yet they haven't had that defining moment where they say, enough is enough. And I'm going to move beyond myself. I'm going to take the courage to take the steps to find my voice. And then when I find my voice, I'm going to find a way to be able to share it in such a way that others are able to hear the message that I have to share. And I love how you are putting those pieces together. What do you do when you have rebels who are lovingly, but definitely disagreeing and struggling to move forward because it really needs to be their way because they have such clear vision of how it's supposed to be? How do you help them massage their voice and move into a place of being able to have the message be as strong, as stringent, but yet perhaps more palatable? Maybe that's the word.
Mm-hmm. Force is never the answer. So if a rebel is, and I can, I have done this myself, pushing harder, talking louder, starting to get tight and push and saying it and wondering why nobody is understanding me, that is not the way to get the message heard. I believe physically, we're told that there's kind of an either or in the world. You can be powerful or powerless, aggressive or meek. In reality, there's a spectrum, and I break it down into 3 families of ways we can show up physically to start to get the spectrum. There's weak or avoidant or imploding. There's pushing, forcing, demanding. And then there's a place in the middle that's an equal power, balanced, be with other people. So with someone who's a rebel and is teetering over into frustration because no one is understanding them, I often remind them that they're seeing something first because that's what they're born to do. And there's a kind of patient persistence in knowing you can't get the world to understand the thing that they don't understand yet by yelling louder in one moment. It's from a balanced, open-hearted physicality. Say it. Say it again. Say it again, as if you are inviting people to come into the new world that you're presenting to them, and you're letting them choose when they're going to jump into that new pool, because you can't actually drag them kicking and screaming, no matter how important you believe this other place is. And I say all of that, I'm, feeling pretty open-hearted here chatting with you, and I have done it. I have made the mistake of pushing and forcing and talking louder and really trying to drag people kicking and screaming, and seen firsthand that they tend to, if there's ABCs. I call them the ABCs of physicality. If C is controlling, A is avoiding, and B is balanced. If I go to C, all the people whose habit is to avoid, they're going to do their pattern.
You bet.
I might push harder, and then they're going to do their pattern. Instead of, I'm here in B, and I'm inviting you again, and I'm inviting you again. And I'm here with open arms, open heart, physically and energetically. And part of that is having the person who's a rebel know it's not because you're doing anything wrong. You were born to see the things you see, and they were not. So you didn't do anything wrong. They're forming new neural pathways of what you're talking about every time you say it. So say it again.
It's so often that we need to hear things 7 times before we begin to interact with them at any point that makes a difference. And I think about the times where I was absolutely adamant that everybody needed to get in the boat and do it the same way. And then they get in the boat and we're trying to do it the same way, but there was no education. There was no, when we come across this issue, this is how, because what I'm seeing is the end product. And so I think one of the gifts of say it again, keep offering, say it again, is that it gives people a chance to think about it. It gives them a chance to begin to have questions. that they can start asking those questions. And when you have buy-in, then you actually have real change. So it's not the outside looky, we got from this point to another point. We're doing things differently. Yippee. That's not the point. Doing it differently isn't the point. It's about that we have buy-in, that we have agreement, at least on this particular movement of how we're going to move forward. And I love how you talk about not just having openness with your body, but also in your voice, having an open way of being able to speak, of holding on to those vowels a little bit longer. So it's almost sing talking, right? In a way that invites people to listen differently, for them to come into this open door, for them to be able to start to see from a different perspective. Because you're right, if they were born with the same thing, we'd be crusading together side by side, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you reminded me years ago, I was reflecting something back in a class with one of my mentors. And I said, I found my own way to do it, or something like that. And she said, well, that's how, as if it were just about me, that's how you have to do everything. And I said, you always have to find your own way. You always have, and you always will have to find your own way. And the way she said it was as if it was a trait of Lauri, which is very true. I have a bit of rebelliousness myself. And I had been teaching by that point. And I said, yes. And I believe that for it to be embodied or integrated or actually learned,
Yes.
everyone has to make it their own. Otherwise, we're just regurgitating and parroting something back to you, whether you're talking about math, or you're talking about an acting skill, or you're talking about leadership, or you're talking about science, philosophy. We take it in, we wrestle with it, we play with it like Play-Doh, and then eventually we make it our own. And now we've embodied it, we've integrated it. And it's beautiful that everyone does that in their own way. It's part of, in theater and in sports, it's the differences that make the ensemble or the team stronger.
Yes. Yes. I love that you shared that we have to learn it our own way. I remember learning how to drive, and we were living at the time in Michigan, and there were lots of gravel roads. And I had been told very specifically multiple times by different people, when you're on a gravel road, it can take a little longer to stop. And I was like, yeah. I remember the first time that I hit the brakes and the movement underneath the car of the gravel coming along with us was legit. It's not that I hadn't heard it. It wasn't that it wasn't in the book. It was that I hadn't learned it for myself. I hadn't experienced it. I hadn't had that aha moment of, this is what these words mean. Now, gratefully, not everybody needs to, test to see if the water really is hot when somebody says it's hot water, right?
Yeah.
There comes this point of maturity of being able to take someone else's word when we have people that we trust. Just like Richard, when he would take his glasses off, you knew this was a moment to trust what he was going to be sharing next and to lean in, because it may not feel like it's set perfectly the first time he said it, but yet what he was saying was the perfect thing that would set at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. And that one was pretty quick. And there were many others where he said it, and it was like I intellectually understood something that he said, and it took weeks. The first one even probably took months.
Yeah. I hear you. Yes.
Yeah.
I remember taking piano lessons, and my Belgian teacher, who was teaching me in French, was showing me and saying, if you'll just, and saying it in French also, if you'll just lead with your elbow when you do these patterns as you move up the keyboard or down the keyboard, it'll make all the difference in the world. And again, that space of, trying it rigid, and then finally saying, okay, it's not just about getting the notes right. It's about how I'm playing those notes. It's not just about memory. It's about how the song is being gifted, how it's being shared, and coming to that realization in a whole different way. So important.
Yeah. And that's absolutely true about speaking. And it's sneaky. And our inner critics want to focus on what am I going to do? What am I going to say?
Yes. Yes.
And it's also about how we say them. There's two Maya Angelou quotes that I love. One is, people will forget what you did. People will forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. She also said, words mean more than what is set down on paper. It takes the human voice to infuse them with deeper meaning.
Yes.
And I love that from her because she had a soulful speaking voice, and she was also a poet.
Right.
One of the best ever. So if she's saying it's more than what was down on the page, it's also the how you say it.
Yes.
We should listen to her.
Yes. And then it's also how I feel when I'm receiving the gift, right? I was the other day talking with my sister and talking about the poem that, stopping by the woods on a snowy evening, and just coming to that place, Robert Frost, coming to that place of how I feel when I read that poem. And because it is so much more than just the words on a paper. It's so much more. And maybe that's why we gravitate to certain books or to certain authors or to certain poetry or to certain podcasts or to certain television shows. I know that for me, when I'm looking for words, looking for the word in French is mot, but we're looking for the exact word to express how I'm feeling about something. That there are times where I will go and listen specifically to different people who recorded, thankfully, 40 and 50 years ago, just looking for, if I'm not going to hear the word in the speech that they gave, coming into a space of allowing that, what they shared, how I feel, to help bring that word forward for me. That can be such an important piece. I know that you have put together so many different pieces in Voice Matters. What's one piece of advice or more that you would like to share, a tool perhaps, for somebody who is thinking about, I have this thing that I need to share, I have this thing I need to say, as a leader, whatever form that takes, as an entrepreneur, as somebody who really needs to share this concept? How would you suggest that they begin crafting what they want to say? Would you say just allow the spirit to move you? Would you go to another part of the spectrum of, hey, write it all out? How would you encourage them to move forward with what is just beginning to bubble up inside?
The first thing that I would say is to decide, what's your intention emotionally? What emotion or energy or vibe do you want to create in the room, even if it's a Zoom room, when you're talking? That can help align a person so that they're, instead of like feathers floating in the air, I could say all of these things.
That's good.
It helps, if that's your intention, some of the things that you will say become clearly not a part of this talk that you're going to give. And then whether they write it all out or they verbally process their way or something in between is usually up to the person. So if you're a writer and that feels like your soul's primary language is writing, then yeah, go off and free write until you have pages and pages and pages.
Yes.
And then translate that, just like books are translated, adapted to be movies,
Right,
into a simple outline with a hello, a goodbye, and 3 sections, 3 acts. Like plays used to have 3 acts, and movies and television still have 3 acts, even when it's only 22 minutes.
True.
A beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yes.
And those 3 will help you remember and surprise yourself that you could probably, once you've written it all out, if that's your starting point, look down at your 3 notes and do it off the cuff because you know it and you created it.
Mm.
At the other end of the spectrum are the verbal processors like me, who might need to talk our way there, who might need to put the outline of what we think the 3 things are and talk it, and then talk it again. And wherever the starting point is, what I feel is the best way is to think of it like a structured improvisation. Like Saturday Night Live is a structured improv. They create the thing all week, and then they've got a thing backstage that cues them to which improv are we now doing. They don't learn it like a full play.
Correct.
And doing that as a speaker, no matter which end of the spectrum you're coming from to get to that point, is the way that allows people to then reconnect to that intention and invite people to join them in that intention.
Yes. Going back to childhood, I remember when I had been teaching for a number of years, so obviously an adult. We're sitting through staff meetings, and in order to stay present and listening and to not share my opinion or opinions, I began drawing. And I began drawing what would it feel like. And I would not consider myself to be somebody who is an artist. There are things I've done calligraphy, I've taken classes, there are things that I really enjoy doing. But in certain terms of saying, let me draw you a picture, it's going to be kind of stick people. So just kind of going with that. Going back to childhood, I was given a Holly Hobby book at one point, and I was just so impressed with this book, along with the doll that I was given, that I began working really hard as a 5 and 6 and 7-year-old to draw this particular picture. Maybe I was a little bit older than that. In the staff meeting, I found myself drawing the tree, drawing the swing that was hanging from a branch in the tree. And I thought, who's going to be on the swing today? And I thought, it's going to be me. Now, the original picture was Holly Hobby, right? So me, how do I want to feel? What do I want to have around me? What am I hearing? What am I experiencing? And still listening to the staff meeting, just allowing this to kind of come out. That picture came for me to be what I would think about as I was thinking, I need to have a change in what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. I began drawing that picture in staff meetings in 2007, in the spring of. In 2008, I was given the opportunity to change what I was doing into another form of teaching, still in the same district, still serving children, but it gave me so much more freedom. Mm-hmm. And I think that space of drawing, going back to, again, just allowing, I didn't sit down to say, okay, I'm going to draw something from my childhood, but just being in that space of being receptive. So I really appreciate what you're saying about if you are somebody who speaks, speak it out. If you are somebody who writes, write it out. I love your point of coming to the beginning and the middle, the beginning and the end, and then putting the parts in there as well. The hello and the goodbye with the 3 parts in between is just so impactful. So I'm processing right now because I'm just finding that to be so good. When I was teaching 2nd grade, we would teach very specifically. We would take the paper and fold it into thirds, and we would say, what do you want in the beginning? What do you want at the end? And then what do you want to have in the middle? And so we'd put the, BME on the paper, and then the kids would go from that, whether they drew it or put colors or whatever it happened to be, and then take that as their processing, their thinking time to be able to start to actually begin to write. And yeah. I do think that processing is so good to get it out of our brain and into something in front of us that we can hold.
Yeah. And processing rather than trying to get it perfect.
Yes.
Or go straight to the finished product.
Yes.
As an actor for years, I had a really bad habit of showing up on day 1 of rehearsals. And I realized it later, like trying to be at closing night quality on day 1.
Right.
That's not how it works. Mm-hmm. And it was, that tightness and those masks, it was in that phase.
Yes.
And I used to get sick on every show I was in. And my breakthroughs would come when I was sick.
Yes.
When I gave myself, when I was sick, the inner critics, it's like I did not have enough energy to fuel the inner critic and myself standing upright and saying the lines.
Yes.
So I would go in and all I could do was respond to what was happening in the moment.
Yes.
And the number of directors' jaws that were on the floor at the like, you had a fever of 103 back when we used to just go to the show.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Pre-COVID.
Right. Right.
And you just did that. And after one of them in particular, where the character I was playing was very controlling, I went, what if I just surrendered on day one? Maybe I wouldn't need to get sick to have these breakthroughs. And the very next show after that, I did not get sick. Mm-hmm. And I learned, and still about a year, last fall, I was doing a show where I, after many, many years, snuck back into old patterns and I got sick again. And then I surrendered and I let the rest of the cast join me and we played together.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good, talking about showing up for rehearsal 1 and having it ready for the final night. Yeah, that's so good. There's a book that I've read. It was gifted to me written by Michael Singer, called The Surrender Experiment. And such a good mind-opening book about what it can look like to surrender to the goodness that's around, to surrender to the next door opening, to be available for that, to be open for those moments of surrender. And like you said, how others would come to you later on and just be in awe of the work that you had done on stage in portraying and bringing in exactly all of the right pieces. And in part because you're right, when we're sick, it's really hard to do what's in front of us, plus be fighting the inner critic.
Yeah.
That's a difficult piece to do. In the space of advice, you've given some incredible advice. What advice would you give to somebody who is been processing for a while? They have had some success, but they are looking to really expand from TikTok to a TED Talk. They're looking to really move forward and to have things move quickly. What would you suggest for them?
If they're wanting things to move quickly, I would say trust yourself and go get some help. Someone who's going to support your vision, not someone who's going to tell you how they would do it if they were in your shoes. And part of that is because in the leadership and speaking world, in theater and film and television, there are 3 jobs: the writer who writes the script, the director who watches it from the outside, and the actor/performer who gets up on stage and does it. And in the speaking and leadership world, so often we're trying to do all 3 of them at once on our own in isolation. And getting someone to help with the performance coaching, or to be kind of the director outside eye, or to write it, or to be like a midwife helping us write it ourselves, really does speed it up. So you probably could grow in all the same ways if you want to take a little longer to do it yourself. It might go faster if you get some help, while also trusting yourself and making sure that you're hiring someone who is supporting your vision.
Yes. Yes. And for those listening in, if you are finding that you want to have more conversations with Lauri, there will be information in the show notes where you can connect with her in that space as well. As we are coming to a place of closing this conversation, because we're going to have more in the future, Lauri, I can feel that. Are there things that you would like to reiterate? And I'm going to give you the full stage for you to be able to share.
I would love to reiterate. I don't know if I said it exactly this way. if you're out there and you have a knowing inside of you that you're here to help make the world a better place, a different place, know that your voice matters. Your voice is needed in the world. It's like humanity is one big orchestra. And up until now, it's as if the entire string section has not been playing. So the drums are trying to beat harder, when what we really need is every soul's voice in the conversation. Know that your voice is needed, trust yourself, and then set an intention for what you want to create in the world. Align yourself, body, breath, and energy with that intention, and then invite other people to join you in making your vision a reality.
Lauri, that is so powerful and beautiful and intricate. And thank you so much for sharing that. And to our audience, we just want to say thank you for coming along for this journey. Lauri and I have enjoyed being here with you. And Lauri, thank you so much for taking the time out of your incredibly busy schedule to be with us, to share this wisdom, and we thank you. And so when we are together next time for the next episode of Simply Sarah, we look forward to once again bringing you a conversation with somebody carefully crafted, carefully selected to be able to help you grow what you are doing. Because every single episode we come to share with you energetic gifts so that your life, your business, what you are doing as an entrepreneur is better, that it's exactly who you are in the way that you want it to be.